The Commonwealth does not exist in a vacuum. Several settlements, city-states, and nations exist just beyond their borders. This series will explore the lore of some of the more interesting neighbors that the Commonwealth has. In this episode, we will explore the Commonwealth's neighbors around the Great Lakes area, the Ronto Pirate Clans and the Finger Lakes Alliance, the formation of these states, their current situation, and their relations with the Commonwealth. Before starting, please remember to share, like, and subscribe. It helps the channel to grow and to bring more content like this to other Fallout fans. Thank you. The story of the Ronto Pirate Clans really began in Detroit, before the Great War. The Great Lakes Trade Organization, or the GLTO, was established in the mid-20th century to foster trade between cities along the Great Lakes and to tackle issues that restricted trade. Overall, the GLTO was an unremarkable group, but it did build up an extensive series of contacts among various cities on the lakes. In the year 2095, after the Great War, the last president of the GLTO, Peter Moore, was still alive in the ruins of Detroit. He decided to use the group's contacts with other cities in the network to try and restart civilization. Using his experience as the head of the GLTO, Moore traveled by boat to those major cities that still existed and began organizing trade between them. He tried to contact Chicago, but found the city quite silent after it had been hit by multiple nuclear explosions. He convinced the surviving cities of the group to begin exchanging things like grain, iron ore, coal, livestock, and timber. The cities began doing a brisk trade amongst themselves, and for a time it seemed that the GLTO could be the key to restarting civilization around the Great Lakes. The group even had plans to offer memberships to cities away from the Great Lakes, like Ottawa, Montreal, and even the Pit. Toronto joined the network as a hub connecting the Midwest to the East Coast of North America. The city itself had little to trade. Before the war, Toronto had been known as a financial hub and a tech center, but there were no major farms or mining operations in the region. The American occupation of Canada had pillaged Toronto's tech center, and the war had effectively ended the Toronto commodities market. After the American army left, the city had been left to slowly wither and die in the post-war era. Within the GLTO, Toronto barely managed to survive. Its tiny fishing fleet kept it fed, and they charged ships tolls to use their ports. But they did not prosper. City manager, Olivia Ford, thought it unfair that other cities in the Great Lakes were doing so well, and her city was not. Other cities such as Cleveland and Bay City took her side and claimed that other cities were benefiting more from the alliance than they were. Ford requested permission to raise port fees, but the GLTO refused her request. As other cities began to prosper more and more, Ford began to resent the alliance. The breaking point came when a boat captain from Illinois refused to pay his port fees, leading to a violent altercation at the docks. Olivia Ford then decided that they would force ships to pay more whether they liked it or not. Ford commissioned privateers to sail into Lake Ontario and stop cargo boats. The privateers would demand payment to pass in safety, sometimes taking up to half the cargo. The GLTO diffused the situation by allowing Toronto to collect higher port fees. However, the crews on those privateers found that they liked extorting ships and soon began operating in secret. By 2105, it became evident that Toronto was brazenly taking ships and cargoes. As word spread that there was good plunder available to those that would join the privateers, hundreds flocked to Toronto to join the growing privateer fleet. Led by Privateer Commodore Bartholomew Buckler, the Toronto privateer fleet effectively ended East-West commerce. The situation was in danger of becoming an open war. In October of that year, President Moore, along with a delegation of other city managers, took a boat to Toronto in a naive attempt to mediate a solution. They never returned. Instead, A flotilla of boats from Cleveland and Toronto attacked the docks of Detroit, while an army from Bay City marched overland to the city. On October 30th, Detroit was destroyed and plundered. Toronto and her allies then went on to attack other ships and cities from the Alliance. The other cities, too confused as to what was happening, were too slow to form an effective defense force to repel the pirates. Many of the other cities in the network were plundered and destroyed. Within a year, the Great Lakes were left in complete anarchy. It was around this time that Toronto began to be referred to as Ronto, and people began calling them pirates. As the GLTO faded into history, so began the first golden age of piracy on the Great Lakes. Meanwhile, in a distant bunker, the Enclave sat back and watched the chaos unfurl. The GLTO had been on the brink of restoring civilization in the Great Lakes area, and that could not be permitted. Enclave agents had secretly encouraged Toronto to wage war on the rest of the GLTO. The pirates had effectively destroyed any hope of a civilian government being established in the region. Soon, pirate ships sailed the Great Lakes, seizing any cargo or fishing vessel that they spotted. The pirates even threatened smaller towns on the coast and demanded ransom to leave them alone. Those cities that refused to pay the pirates were sacked and burned to the ground. Soon, Buffalo, Rochester, and Kingston were reduced to smoldering ashes. The threat of the pirate fleet forced Montreal and Ottawa to form a temporary alliance to hold back the pirate menace. Even Ronto's allies suffered. In 2112, the pirates used a petty excuse to destroy Bay City and then demanded tribute from Cleveland to leave them alone. At the height of their power, the pirates had over 100 boats and sailed unchallenged on the lakes. City Manager Ford clashed with Commodore Buckler over control of the fleet. The Commodore began assuming more control over Ronto, and the city manager was pushed into the background. By 2115, the pirates tried to expand their power beyond the lakes. They aimed to take control of the Erie Canal and to reach the Atlantic via the Hudson River, thus avoiding the Quebec Knights on the St. Lawrence River. It was here that they first encountered the Finger Lakes Alliance, just south of Rochester. The pirates demanded that the inhabitants of the Finger Lakes submit to them, or else be destroyed. Making their way overland, the pirates were vulnerable to ambushes launched by the inhabitants of the Finger Lakes. The pirates found out that fighting on land was wholly different to fighting on water. At the Battle of Canandaigua, the pirates were defeated and forced to flee back to Lake Ontario. This disaster brought into question the leadership of Commodore Buckler. City Manager Ford urged several other captains to assert their right to be the new Commodore of the fleet. Soon the pirates found themselves embroiled in a civil war. Buckler, Ford, and several of the other captains died in the ensuing battles. Along with this, the supremacy of the pirates ended. The first golden age of piracy came to an end. Eventually, the Civil War settled into a period of watchful aggression. The pirates reformed themselves into what they called clans, groups of ships that owed allegiance to a specific pirate lord. The pirate clans patrolled separate parts of the Great Lakes and claimed them as their exclusive territory. But no one captain could unite them all, and although the pirates were still feared, they were no longer able to freely pillage the lakes as before.
It was in this age that the most legendary of the pirate captains was born. Aaron the Adventurer was the son of a bosun in Greg Goldenbeard's clan. Although not related by blood, Greg Goldenbeard taught Aaron everything he knew about piracy. He learned how to navigate by the stars, how to accurately fire cannons, and how to fight with sword and pistol. Greg Goldenbeard died during a skirmish with the Port Rowan pirates. This left their clan leaderless. But at the age of 15, Aaron stepped up to lead the clan into some legendary misadventures. So began the second great age of piracy. But instead of raw violence, this age was marked by pirates seeking adventure farther and farther away from the Great Lakes. This would lead to Aaron's 7 great voyages of plunder. The voyages were remembered more for the stories and yarns that the pirates told about distant lands, rather than the actual treasures that they brought back. Aaron's adventures were later condensed into a single volume and sold as children's stories in the 24th century. Those stories would fill an entire episode by themselves, but some of the more notable adventures are worth retelling here. In 2178, on his third voyage of plunder, Captain Aaron landed on the southern coast of what used to be known as Boston. Tales had traveled north of a fabulous treasure found in a town called Jamaica Plain. The pirates landed south of an abandoned fort and made their way inland. They fought their way past a horde of ghouls and reached an old town hall. Captain Aaron and Bosun Mulroney went inside. They worked their way past several locked doors and elaborate traps. The captain went in alone and viewed the fabled treasure of Jamaica Plain. No one ever said what he found inside, but Mulroney admitted that the captain laughed uproariously. Aaron had Mulroney reset all the security protocols and lock the doors again, declaring that this was too fine a jest to keep to himself. The pirates settled for looting a couple of coastal settlements and going home. The pirate raid of the Commonwealth spurred some of the local settlements to come together and form the first version of what would later become known as the Minutemen. During his sixth voyage, the pirates made it all the way to New Orleans. The town leaders begged the pirates not to plunder the city. In exchange, they promised them the location of a much greater golden treasure far up the Mississippi River. The pirates cautiously sailed upriver through overgrown swamps, passing by primitive villages, seeing odd sights along the way, and fighting skirmishes with the locals and wild animals. When they reached a site of the golden treasure in the ruined city of St. Louis, all they found was the remains of a beer brewery making a gold-colored beer. Unlike his previous disappointment in the Commonwealth, Aaron did not find this deceit to be amusing at all. He returned to New Orleans and set it on fire before sailing home. In 2183, Aaron prepared for his most audacious adventure yet. Old maps and legends told of a land across the ocean called Europe. The challenge of crossing the Great Salt Sea to find untold treasures was too appealing for Aaron to ignore. Aaron set off in late August, and neither he nor his ship were ever seen again. Most historians opine that he was caught by a hypercane off the coast of New England. Others say that he made it to Europe, but found so much wealth that he decided to stay, and yet others that he ended up in a totally different location. Unfortunately, no evidence exists to support any theory, and his fate will forever remain a mystery. In the modern day, news of the distant Commonwealth growing stronger begins to worry the pirates. Barabbas Khan, one of the captains of the trapper pirates on Far Harbor, escaped the Minutemen invasion of 2293. He warned the Ronto pirates of the threat posed by the Commonwealth. He has proposed reuniting all the pirate clans into one single nation under his command, a nation that could stand up to the power of the Minutemen. He has even reached out to Ottawa to form an alliance to oppose the Commonwealth-Quebec alliance. But even if the pirates honor their word, the Finger Lakes alliance to the south may thwart their plans.
First settled about 9,000 years ago, the Finger Lakes region has always been a lush and coveted location for humans to build settlements. In the years before the Great War, the Finger Lakes region was an exclusive lakeside community for the wealthy and elite of New York City. They would spend weekends enjoying the pristine beauty of the lakes. The Finger Lakes Landowner Society, a coalition of large landowners, kept the lakes as their own private preserve. They treated the smaller landowners and locals with contempt. The locals resented these rich outsiders, but knew that they could never do anything against them, so they kept their resentment to themselves. When the bombs fell, most of the large landowners were caught back in the city and never made it back to their lakeside estates. Those few rich outsiders that were left tried to assert their dominance over the locals, using their personal security guards as their own private militias. As it became clear that civilization would not be returning anytime soon, the Finger Lakes Landowner Society began forming a government, acting as the lords of the lakes and using their guards to bully and dominate the locals. This situation continued until 2094, when the locals became fed up with the arrogant outsiders and decided to end them once and for all. On the night of April 8th, the locals secretly gathered and one by one sacked and destroyed all the rich mansions on the lakes. The night of 100 fires and 1,000 screams, as it became known, marked a turning point for the Finger Lakes. A council of leaders gathered at Watkins Glen on Lake Seneca. They represented each of the 11 Finger Lakes. After much debate, they created a new government. Each of the lakes would rule itself and would only come together for trade and to defend each other from outsiders. The Finger Lakes Alliance was born. The council created a flag to represent them all, a flag that recognized each of the lakes within the alliance. The lakes began to grow as a culture centered around fishing and agriculture. They began forming a religion centered around lake spirits. By 2115, the alliance was barely 20 years old when their greatest enemy arrived from the north. In June of that year, the Ronto pirates were looking to expand south. They wanted to use the Erie Canal to conquer the Hudson River Valley. As the Finger Lakes were nearby, they decided to conquer the inhabitants of the lakes first. They planned to use them as free labor to clear the canal. Marching from Rochester, the pirates quickly overran Conesus, Hemlock, Cannadice, and Honey Oy lakes. Believing that the rest of the lakes would fall just as easily, the pirates sent half their forces back to Rochester. Meanwhile, the elders of the Finger Lakes gathered at Penn Yan and held a council of war to decide on the best course of action. They elected Joseph Green, a warrior from the Owasco Lake area, to lead them into battle. Green divided the lake men into 5 columns and attacked the pirates as they marched from Honeoye to Canandaigua. The battered pirates reached Canandaigua early the next morning and were surprised to see a large force of lake men waiting for them. The resulting battle was a rout. The pirates retreated to Rochester, suffering casualties all along the way. What used to be known as the Rochester Road was renamed the Bloody Trail. Hearing the battle in the distance, the other half of the pirates at Rochester went south to help their fellow pirates, but they made slow progress. Some of the more religious-minded lake folk say the old man of the lake confronted the pirates. Others say it was snipers with crossbows and muskets hiding behind trees. Whatever the cause, the relief force could not make it in time to save the other pirates. The battle ended near Pittsford, just south of Rochester, as the lake men allowed the remaining pirates to board their ships and leave. Nearly 300 pirates died that day. The disastrous Battle of the Lakes kicked off the pirates' civil wars, and it would be 60 years before the pirates even approached Rochester again. Most of the lake men gave thanks to the old man of the lake for his help in battle, and his cult began to grow. After the battle, Green gave up his power, and the lakes went back to being separate settlements, running their own affairs but ever mindful of outsiders that might harm them. In late 2293, envoys from the Green Mountain Militia in nearby Vermont approached the lakemen. They asked the elders for help in their struggle against the Commonwealth. The elders of the lakes met at Watkins Glen to decide what to do. In the end, it was decided not to get involved in the fighting, their reasoning being that they did not want to attract the attention of the Commonwealth and make themselves a target. As of 2295, the elders of the lakes have heard that the pirates in the 51st state of Ottawa were banding together to launch a new invasion of the lakes. However, rather than seeking allies, the elders have decided to confront the new invasion whenever it occurs, trusting in their lake gods to protect them. In the next chapter, we will cover the city-state of Cleveland and the tigermen of the Upper Ohio River Valley. So be sure to subscribe to the channel to see the next video in the series.